good with these things. Let's see if this plays. Okay, so how many of you hold a professional accreditation? How many of you hold Eng Tech, High Eng or C Eng? Pretty good numbers. Well, Network Rail do quite well in this area. So last year, 55% of the applicants to RailEI were Network Rail. And that's great, but it could be better. Overall, only 18% of Network Rail members hold a professional qualification with RailEI. Less than 6% of those are chartered. Obviously, there is other institutions that they may be registered with, but for us trackies, as we've said, the PWI or RailEI as we are now, that's our main bread and butter. So what's stopping you considering becoming an Eng Tech, an Eng or a C Eng? Is it that you think you have an academic gap and you're not eligible? You don't have the time, or you don't think there's the need? Well, there's some pretty good reasons why you should. Recognition. Chartered engineer is a protected title under civil law and recognised across multiple industries. Career progression, Nick touched on it. As you move up the food chain, chartership becomes quite an essential requirement for many roles. And the one that I think will get everyone's attention, salary. Typically, a chartered engineer can earn up to 25% more than their non-chartered counterparts. Now I've got you interested. And lastly, worldwide opportunity. Obviously, chartered engineer being a recognised title, it can take you abroad and into other areas of the rail industry in other climes. So here's my story. God, that haircut's awful. I spent my first 12 years in maintenance. I started as a tech officer, and it's quite funny to watch some of the presentations. My day-to-day bread and butter was marking up for tampers, stressing, doing mini digs, and managing ultrasonic test plans. Back then, things were very, very different. We had very little automation. All tamping had to be surveyed manually with lifts and slews marked on the ground, and typically I'd walk about 3 miles a day with a dumpy level and staff. I was a lot thinner and a lot fitter. We had no Tiger, no Insight. I'd spend hours converting figures into colour bands and then having to colour them in on graph paper to make it look like a CCTQ graph, which was maddening when you were about 3 miles in and realised you'd missed 20 chain further back and had to rub it all out and start again. Needs to say, I had a good stash of colour pencils, one red, one yellow, one green. My mentor at the time was a PTO called Dave Easterbrook. I'm sure it's a name some of you may remember. He instilled in me the ethos that everybody mucks in on site, no standing back, which was fine for most tasks, but they did take pity on me when it came to the hammer, and I was given a welder's £2 hammer to knock clips in and out. I thought on reflection that this was compassion, but in hindsight, probably more likely to be self-preservation on their part for me swinging a hammer around uncontrollably. As part of my employment, I had to attend college, and which I did on a day release basis. Firstly, I got my ONC, and then I went on and did my HNC, which I achieved in 1997. By then, I'd changed jobs, and I was an assistant track engineer with Railtrack. I then went on to achieve my IEng with the ICE in 99, but quickly discovered I had no route to chartership unless I had the degree. As Nick touched on, there were very limited options at that stage. So I gave up. Life was good, work was busy, and I had IEng, and I thought it was enough. I did actually go on to try and do the degree, and I survived the first semester, but I quit. I was working on the north end of Anglia at the time, travelling a lot, and I just felt that it was too much for me. Over the next few years, I changed roles several times, and I went to work for the professional head of track as a standards and assurance engineer. And I'm afraid I am guilty as the first author of the first edition of TRK 001, so I apologise profusely now. It was a lot thinner back then. I then moved to track renewals and spent 13 years delivering projects. And in the pictures that you can see are some of my more favourable moments. So Gideon Park, we had the dilemma of a single line platform, and we didn't have the duration of access to be able to go in and out with a dumper. So one of the team come up with the unconventional idea of using a conveyor belt, which worked absolutely brilliant until we got greedy and overloaded it and it broke. Several hours later, we got it fixed and it carried on. Tottenham Hale, I'm not sure, but I think I was the only team to have undertook a Mark III modular S&C renewal in 8 hours. It was a crossover at Tottenham Hale. My heart was in my mouth. We had more people watching us than on site working, but we managed to pull it off. But I think we all realised that we weren't really ready for Mark III modular at that stage, really. Colchester single line was my first use of the VAC under S&C. I thought it was a brilliant concept. What I hadn't factored was how long it took to empty the damn thing and how quickly it filled up. It took forever. It's a great bit of kit, but like anything, you've got to know when to use the right thing in the right place. We did a good job, but it would have been so much quicker to lift the panel out in the first place. And then one of my more unusual ones, Alresford in Kent. We'd got a relay going through a level crossing, quite a conventional job, except for about 4 weeks before we were due to start, we got a phone call from a very fraught lady saying that she was about to get married, and we just destroyed the route from her reception to the church, and that basically she couldn't have her horse and cart because the diversionary route was a 20-minute drive. So the team come up with an ingenious idea. We trashed the plan and rejigged it, and we left a bit of the level crossing in and used a temporary bridge to allow her to get to her wedding. They were so grateful, and it was really great to see because you had this lovely line of orange saluting as they went past. And then East Ham, it was my first high-speed handback. I was absolutely terrified this thing wouldn't hold. We'd never used it before. The Roebuck camps, obviously, they're very well understood now and well used, but back then, I think we were first or second in the country to use them. And it was a real achievement. I actually wrote some of my technical report about that. And then lastly, probably one of my more unfortunate memories, but one that you learn the most from, Sevenoaks Tunnel, 2017. Still got the scars. We were relaying inside the middle of the tunnel. It's a 2-mile long tunnel, and we were plumb in the middle. And over the weekend, we had massive ventilation problems, so it resulted in 2 full evacuations of the tunnel. Now, I can honestly say I was there for one of those when it went wrong, and a welder had just dropped to one of the welds when the ventilation dropped. And I went in the space of less than 10 seconds, the person standing next to me, I couldn't even see him anymore. It's pretty unsettling to be in somewhere like that when that happens. But you can imagine evacuating 60 plus people out of a mile deep tunnel. It doesn't take 5 minutes, and we lost so much time. Coupled with that, the water levels kept rising, the over-pumping system wasn't coping, and essentially we ended up trying to relay in a pond. Strongly recommend you don't do that. So the inevitable happened. We overrun. We got it open Monday morning at lunchtime, and you can imagine the outfall from it. I would say it was pretty miserable for the next couple of months for me. I had a lot of please explain meetings. However, we took so much learning from that. And eventually we went back into Sevenoaks Tunnel and we completed best part of a 20 million package of programs in there to relay vast extents of it successfully. But yeah, I don't want to ever go in that tunnel again. So, fast forward 17 years, and this amazing job opportunity arises, and I really want this job. Now, I'm generally a calm person in my nature. It takes quite a lot to get me riled, but I can do a pretty good impression of a red rag to a bull if I feel I've been truly had an injustice done. And this was one of them. I approached the senior director, and he told me very clearly I would not be eligible for this role because I wasn't chartered. After 24 years of working in depots, I can't say out loud, but you can imagine the language that was going through my head at that point. But one thing was sure, even though I wasn't going to get this job, I was damn well going to get chartered. Unfortunately for me, the PWI at that time had just started its strategy to become a professional qualification provider. So I became one of their first guinea pigs. At that time, with my academic gap, I had only one option, which was the technical report route. I had to produce a 10,000-word report to demonstrate both my experience, but also my underpinning mathematical and engineering knowledge. I know that sounds difficult, but it's actually just writing about what you know and what you've done. I actually had to thin down the report in the end to meet the word count. And after a lot of rework and 5 revisions of it, I later submitted my report, I attended the technical review, and I successfully achieved my chartership in July 2019. So I did it. Just little old me, no degree, just my work experience. Being chartered certainly opens up opportunities, and in the last year, I've been working with the Eastern Regional Track Engineering team to explore what we can achieve by applying IA and computer vision to video inspection. Many of you are familiar with AVA Intel. This technology is developing faster than we can adapt, and I have no doubt it will become the mainstream form of inspection and detection of defects for the track asset base. Nick touched on it. I'm a strong believer in it. It will be a significant step change for the industry, and it will take time to evolve, but it's a project that I'm really excited to be a part of. So there you have it. You don't have to have a bachelor's or a master's degree. It helps, but it's not the only way. Hands-on work experience, those memorable moments for which have defined you as an engineer, are all you need. You may not realise it, but that gives you a clear route to professional registration. However, I don't want you thinking it's a cakewalk. They don't give them away like sweeties. You need to put the effort in. You need to make sure that you demonstrate the requirements, and I strongly recommend that you get yourself a good sponsor. My sponsor drove me nuts. He was the one person, though, that made me succeed. He pulled my report apart. He questioned and grilled me on every topic that I'd mentioned in it, to the point where I wanted to murder him. But when it came to the interview, I was totally on point because of how he had made me work at it. Today, you're more fortunate. There are more options. As Nick said, if you're applying for IEng with an HNC or foundation degree, you can top up with the TED, the Track Engineering Diploma, to attain further learning. Applying for IEng or CEng and only hold a bachelor level qualification, already holding IEng and going for CEng, you can potentially go down the experiential learning route. And for those that were like me, that don't have the qualifications, the technical report route is still open to you. So if that's all a bit much to take in right now, seek out a colleague. Find someone that's already done their IEng or CEng. Ask them for their help, the support and guidance. Or failing that, contact Paul or Brian, the professional development officers at RailEI, for a chat. They'll really help you and help you work out what the right route is for you. Well, thank you for your time and attention, and I hope I've inspired a few of you to start your own professional development journey.